I feel like called to reconnect with why you're doing it. And so maybe that's where you start. You start by exploring, why are you looking into your relationship with money? What does it matter? And I feel like that's where, too, getting curious about that comes into play. When I was teaching, we did this process, and I believe it was stolen from the corporate manufacturing world, but we'd ask 5 whys, and it's not necessarily 5 whys, but it can be 5 whys, it can be more. So maybe you're thinking about exploring your relationship with money because you're like, my income isn't where I want it to be. So why does it matter that your income isn't where you want it to be? Well, I need money to pay for stuff. So why is income? And like, just starting to explore that and connecting with what is your intention for working on your relationship with money.
Welcome to another episode of the Health Coach Academy podcast. I'm your host, Omar Cumberbatch of omarcumberbatch.com. Really excited to jump into a favorite topic of mine. I almost think this is basically the foundational topic to anything, because mindset around money is the most important thing. I don't think there's really any debate about that. I mean, you can have all these business ideas and marketing schemes, and you have a great brand, but if you still have issues around money, you're not going to make any money. And that's really what I really want to share with you today with today's guest, Brittany Tam. She is a fantastic guest, really breaks down a lot of the issues around money that we stumble upon just trying to figure out our way in the entrepreneurial world. So what's interesting is she does talk about things like how we were brought up, cultural backgrounds, really just certain things that we feel that we may not really notice about how we address our money situation. And if you're not getting any money, there is a good chance that some underlying beliefs around that whole topic is affecting you to a degree that you're going to be very, very compromised in getting to where you want to go, at least in the entrepreneurial journey. So I'm really excited. Like I said, this is a great topic. I think I'm going to definitely look into getting more guests like Brittany on, because it's just such an important topic. So let's do some housekeeping. As always, please leave a rating and review on iTunes. It goes a super, super duper long way in me getting guests of the caliber of Brittany. And as always, please take a look at the website. There's some new updates there. I'm really excited about the course that's going to be on there right now. I just did a great masterclass with Haley Rowe. She broke down some awesome tips, and that's going to be included in the course as well. So it's a nice addition to the course that I'm really excited about sharing with you as well. So let's jump into the show. Hey, Brittany, welcome to the show. How are you today?
I am good. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, I'm excited to have you. This is my favorite topic, is money mindset and just all the things that go around money. I've obviously had my own issues with money over the years and continue to unpack some of the crazy stuff that's in the back of my head. And I really love people like yourself who are really taking this forward and just helping people really unpack all the nonsense that we go through. So I want the audience to get a little bit better idea of who you are, what you do. So can you tell us a little bit about your origin story and how you became focused on this particular path and really validating the importance of our money mindset and our relationship with money?
Yeah. So my journey is kind of long and convoluted. I I came from an Asian background. And one of the things that happens when you come from an Asian background is your parents are very invested in what you do for a living, because that's what's going to generate your money. And that's what's going to help you survive, and survive hopefully comfortably, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so, uh, like, I always wanted to be a teacher, but my parents were very insistent that that should not be the case, because I will never be able to afford the lifestyle that brings me comfort as a teacher. So I did what a good Asian daughter does and didn't have the temperament for law. So I went into the sciences, hopefully possibly leading into being a doctor. Um, but that really wasn't in the cards for me. I did my undergrad in the sciences. I was working in a lab. I was picking out mutations of worms, and I was picking out my favorite mutation. And I was like, this is not my life. So, like, took the long road to, and finally did end up becoming a teacher. I worked overseas. But one of the things that happened was, as I was teaching and working with different admin, I burned out. And I, like, in hindsight, I can see how much of my self-worth was tied in with what I did for work. And when I felt like what I did for work didn't express the vision that I had for kids, for their experiences at school, my self-worth plummeted. And that's when I decided I needed something different. So I was looking around, and I eventually started a bookkeeping practice. And I had this naive idea that I would help people sort out their books, get some financial clarity. I get the data in, pump the polished up reports out, and people would have data on which they could base their business decisions. But it turns out, like you mentioned, all of us grow up with money baggage. We all have beliefs about money that work, and we all have beliefs about money that don't work. So the thing that I was noticing is there were two groups of clients for me. There was the group of clients for whom, like, they had figured out what systems, what things needed to be in place to get the job done, and they got the job done. And our job was so transactional, right? It was exactly like I pictured it. And then there was a large group of my clients where it wasn't so cut and dry, where we had a hard time getting their books and keeping their books up to date. And the other thing that I was noticing is that that group of clients were all women. It was all these women where the systems that we put in just wouldn't stick. And instead of a half an hour meeting that led to them being like, okay, and these are my next steps and these are my choices, we'd be on meetings for an hour and a half, digging into what was behind their resistance to doing the doing around money. And it brought me to a point where I was like, what lights me up more? What brings me more delight? And honestly, it's those big conversations about, what do I believe, and how does what I believe affect my ability to work with money?
So this is fascinating because I think it's so ironic that you had like the traditional left brain thinking, right? Where you're just going in there with the bookkeeping, and I can imagine you being just very by the by the book, just what's the numbers, and it's just like an accounting thing. It's just very logical, and then to see the
Yeah.
other thing where it's just there's something so missing there. Like, how did you even approach the subject, or did you at that point when you were having these hour and a half conversations with these people, like say, hey, you know that there's more here than just this information? How just walk us through that?
Yeah. So I've always loved those sorts of conversations. And um, I've always been that person to friends. But it really came down to, we've tried enough practical things. And once we've tried enough practical things and nothing works, and these practical things work for other people,
Mm-hmm.
then it starts to be not about the system, but there there's something else, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think one of the driving things from when I was teaching was I've always been curiosity driven. My teaching was very curiosity driven, and so it felt really natural to bring that curiosity to the work that I do with clients. And so we just get curious in an open, compassionate, non-judgmental way. Um, and we ask ourselves questions.
So were they open to this conversation, or was this something that evolved post bookkeeping?
So it really, with some clients, some
Mm,
clients are open to it, right? And I think once you see the evidence of we've tried this and we've tried this and we've tried this, and you approach it from that point of curiosity of, so these are not working, is what I'm seeing. Does that match what you're seeing?
mhm.
Okay, we can be agreed that these are not working. So, what else might be going on? And I feel like that really leads naturally into that exploration, especially now that people have such awareness that we're multidimensional beings. Yeah, I think it really leads naturally.
Mhm. So one of the things that I find fascinating about this too is because you saw it in them, and it was pretty obvious that you'd had to have that conversation, and then you do create your own business that really helps people address these issues. When did you first recognize your money story, and what was it, and how did you realize it was holding you back?
It's it's interesting because I think for me it really came out in the entrepreneurship journey. There's a certain level of being able to make things work that you can do when you're traditionally employed that you just can't get away with when you're self-employed, right?
Hmm.
Um, when you're self-employed, you actually have to ask for money. And so that was like a big thing for me. I have to ask people, especially coming from like my background where you don't necessarily ask for what you need. Um, so yeah, and then all of the money stories that came up with acquiring and holding wealth, it was a really interesting journey to walk through.
Hmm. So you trace that story back for yourself. Like, what was it? Can you get into a little bit of detail? Because I think what you probably uncovered is what many of us go through as well. So I'm really curious to hear that. And also, like, once you get finished with your particular part of it, really interested in seeing what you've seen as common threads that most people you work with at this point have.
It's funny you ask that because as you started that question, I was thinking, really, it ends up being variations on a theme.
Hmm.
I feel like there's a lot of stuff that comes up that is connected, and maybe that's just my practice. Maybe that's just who I attract. But I
Hmm.
think that at some level, like a lot of the stuff about money, like if you do the curious and where did that come from? And where did that come from? And I wonder what led to that. I feel like at the core of it, for so many of us, it's about being safe. It's about belonging. It's being seen and being valued. So much of our self worth is tied in with money. And so for all of us, we have like this variety of stories, and some of these stories work beautifully, but some of these stories might not work anymore. And this is making me think of a conversation I had with a friend where we were exploring these ideas a little bit. And the idea of cultural beliefs came up.
Hmm.
And I was talking about, some of those cultural beliefs are heavy.
Hmm.
Coming from an Asian background, like the theme of duty is so big. And we had the conversation of like, how do we let go of some of them? And he I could see him like just contracting and getting really anxious at the thought of us releasing some of these things that we gain from our culture. But the conversation we had, it was all of our cultural stuff comes from a specific time and a specific place. And all of our cultural stuff got passed down because it worked and it helped us survive, if not thrive. But the world changes,
Mm. Yeah,
right?
great point.
And so what might have worked way back when doesn't necessarily work now. And what might have kept us safe way back when doesn't necessarily work now. And that doesn't just apply to culture. I feel like it applies to our personal stories too. And so I feel like the invitation is there to consider, like, we talk about all these beautiful things that we do have that still work. And what happens if we release some of those old stories? How much room does it give us to celebrate all of the things that do work?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that what you brought up too, at least when you were speaking, it brought to mind like just these concepts of, when we are growing up and we are children and we don't feel safe around, like, say, money or just that whole topic. It's amazing that we don't like switch and realize, hey, we're adults now. We're like way more resourceful. We have all these things that we may have not had when we were children, and we're kind of stuck in that mindset. Can you talk about that, Adra?
Yes, I love that. You can't see me. I am like bouncing up and down at the stand up desk right now because that's exactly like it. You know, we hold these memories from when we were kids. Like maybe there's a particular scene that you remember, or maybe it's just something that you always remember your parents saying, and it's something that you took on. Um, and there's this idea that, there are different parts of us. And for that kid that remembers, for example, so one of the things that I really had to work through was this belief that money means power and power means corruption.
Mm,
And to me, like, there's nothing worse than that, because it means that I'm not going to belong in my family. I'm not
hmm.
going to be safe. No one's going to love me. I'm going to be alone forever. So
Yeah.
why would I want money, right? And like I say this and I flash back to 5-year-old self.
Hmm.
And so it makes sense that if that is something that is connected to perhaps trauma or just something that was really, really painful at that point in time, it makes sense that when we as an adult see something that kind of reminds us of that point in time, we get triggered, we get reminded
Hmm.
of that situation, maybe not consciously, maybe that's subconscious. And so it feels like there's an invitation there to have uh perhaps have a conversation with that 5-year-old child and be like, okay, so what what do you see, what are you scared of,
Hmm.
what are you feeling, and do that listening out of that part of yourself that is feeling like it's unsafe or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And like you said, we're resourced. We're in a different time and place. We're in a different situation. We are resourced within ourselves. We are resourced around ourselves, whether that is with money or whether that is with people, or both. So just kind of reassuring that prior self that
Hmm.
I hear you. And I understand where you're coming from, and where you're coming from makes sense and it's valid. And also, this is not our reality right now.
Yeah.
We're okay.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And that's fascinating. And when I speak to you and hear you and even just this conversation and just doing the research on you, it's really interesting because I know what people are probably in the audience thinking right now. It's just like when there's just so many things, even in my life, that I've had so many circumstances where it's like the perfect storm for being a scarcity mindset. And you just brought up even the concepts of like the idea of corruption if you had money and people who aren't paying their fair share or they stole money to get rich. Like it was almost like when I was growing up, like there was no way that you can get rich unless you were like a thief or like you say, somewhat a corrupt politician, or you're basically doing some damage to another person and you never want to be in that category, right? So, and I think one of the things that helped me kind of overcome some of those money blocks was the fact that I stopped talking in absolutes, right? Like it's almost like, say, does everybody who has money, are they greedy? Is everybody in the world who makes a lot of money corrupt? Like I had to look for well, they're definitely not exceptions. They're probably way more the exceptions in the other place. And I started to believe, in the wrong direction. But I just needed examples of people who I felt was, oh wow, that person's doing it and he's an honest guy. And I appreciated that. And that helped me get over some things. I don't know if you've experienced that as well.
Yeah, I love that. Um, I think like I think one of the things that can happen is we know that confirmation bias is a thing, right? And
Yes.
so when we start down like the road of this belief that kept us safe, we collect bits of evidence through life that confirm that. But like you said, there is evidence that that's not the case.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but even beyond that, I think that there is a level of, as I've gotten older,
Mm-hmm.
I've gotten to know myself a little bit better
Mm-hmm.
and developing that sense of trust within yourself too.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because we can grow up with some harsh stories about ourselves.
Yeah.
um, and growing and leaning into that trust, leaning into the trust that you've also chosen people around you that will give you that reality check, right? That will let you know if you're going off of a path that, if you're no longer aligned with who you are at your core.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I love the idea of an evidence journal too. So it's basically what you talked about, but I like to write things down. It keeps things, it settles my brain down.
Mm-hmm.
It means my brain is not like trying to keep track of all these things. So, what is the evidence that just because you're wealthy, you don't have to be corrupt? You can create beautiful, good things in the world with your wealth. Where
Mm-hmm.
have I seen that in popular culture? Where have I seen that in my life?
Mm-hmm.
And also noticing where in popular culture reinforces some of those narratives.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you watch TV, a lot of those narratives are really reinforced by TV, right?
Right.
Um,
Yeah, so it's interesting because you do have the process, like the money coaching core process, right? So what is that actually? How do you help a person get through this issue with money? And can you dive into that a bit?
Yeah, I love the core process. The core process doesn't belong to me. It belongs to Deborah Brown from the Money Coaching Institute. And what the core process involves, it's basically a diagnostic. It's a real deep dive, and you go through your history and you start to document what are the memories that you hold, what are the experiences that you've held, and we look through them to see what patterns have emerged and explore where those patterns might have come from. And through the process, she sorts them through into positive patterns and behaviors and negative. I have really moved away from the value statements in my personal life. I feel like the good and the bad don't necessarily serve me because it brings a level of judgment to myself that I'm self-judgy already. We don't need any more of that. So like what serves us, what doesn't serve us? Deb also has this archetypal framework, which is there to help you kind of put things into categories because human brains love being able to categorize stuff. Right? Mm-hmm. Essentially, what we're trying to do is we're looking at this pattern of woundedness and moving away. What would you do instead? She has a couple of archetypes she calls the warrior and the magician. And to me, that really speaks to, I don't know how woo you guys tend to go, but to me, it speaks to the divine masculine and the divine feminine. And so how do you act in that divine masculine where you interact with the rest of the world? And how do you act in the divine feminine, which is that internal landscape that you hold? So the core process is really there as a diagnostic. And then with that information, we can choose what action that we take. And it's a lot more sustainable because it's sensitive to all of the fears, the anxieties, the worries that can really prevent us from taking action or sustaining action.
I'm glad that you kind of mentioned, where are we as far as like the audience is concerned. I think that we definitely like to go down the rabbit hole a lot. And yeah, I think it's important. So like that being said, in this process of healing ourselves with our money issues, do you think it is more going down the rabbit hole or is it more of the tangible hardcore processes that are needed?
I feel like you can't really do the tangible sustainably and with ease and with joy. It's hard to do that when you haven't resolved some of that emotional internal stuff. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I knew that was the answer, but I wanted you to validate it.
Yeah, I mean, like we can muscle through it. It reminds me of gym days where you would just go in and head down and you push through it, right?
Yeah.
But some of those days didn't necessarily feel good because other stuff wasn't feeling good. And similarly, like you can get stuff done without doing the internal piece, but it doesn't necessarily feel joyful or easy.
Yeah.
Man, life is too short.
Right. And then to that point, I mean, how sustainable is it after you just can't fight through everything every day forever? So I get it.
Yes. And I am a lazy human, right? And what that means is like, I don't mind putting out effort, but I don't want to put out effort to rebuild the ship and then rebuild it and then rebuild it and rebuild it. I want to put out effort to rebuild the ship so that things flow easier, life gets better, and then we can do additional stuff along the way, but I don't want to reinvent the wheel.
No, that's absolutely. I definitely agree 1,000%. So I think I'm gonna have to jump into one of my selfish questions because I had an interview on the show at Amassed and Kip. Maybe it was a year and a half ago, maybe even 2 years, and he identified something in me that I think is relevant to a lot of people, and it was really the inability to receive basically anything, like so,
Mm.
including money. Do you come across many people who have that issue of receiving, and how do we correct that?
I think with a lot of the people that I work with, I do see that, um, and perhaps there's a level of what we choose to do for work. So I know that you're in health coaching because health coaching as a profession means something to you. And I know that you do the podcast because the podcast means something to you, right? And so that does come up. But the thing is, the reasons why it comes up can be very different. So I think that's where the power of the core process comes in because you really do that digging into your personal history to look at what are the messages that you received. So, one example, there was this woman who had a complex relationship with her mother, as I feel like a lot of us do. Um, but part of that complex relationship with her mom meant that she didn't feel safe being bigger than her mom.
Mm,
So she wasn't bigger than her mom. She didn't receive stuff. She didn't put herself out there in the same way. But like for me, part of my problem with receiving, like that, I was that, and I think the thing too is we continue to work through this stuff.
hmm.
Um, just work through it in layers and levels. Um, but my thing was, I don't want to be bad. I don't
Bad.
want to do bad things in the world.
Hmm.
I want to create beautiful things. And if I have a lot of money, maybe the temptation will be there to do bad things to continuously increase my wealth. And yeah, so I think that's where maybe starting to dig into your own personal history comes to play. What is it that you remember hearing as a kid?
Hmm.
What is it that you remember seeing as a kid? Um, do you remember particular experiences um, with receiving? Was receiving conditional? Um, one of the things that like my mom said to me at one point was, Brittany, love is conditional. If you are not kind, if you are not considerate, people don't have to love you. And I say this like this is my mom's wounded self, right?
Mm, hmm.
And so like this is not with any sort of resentment towards my mom because I know my mom was doing the best that she could with what she had.
Hmm.
Nobody nobody has a kid to try and totally mess them up, right?
Right.
But it doesn't mean that we have to carry all those things that our parents give us.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, and that's a great example that you posed is the conditional aspects of things and just how that translate later on in life. Where does that melt into, including money, including relationships, including so many different dynamics of your life that you just got that piece from, and it can affect you in ways that you are just realizing you because you are taking the time to unpack some of these things that go on and how it made you feel.
Yeah, and the way that some of them can intersect too.
Hmm.
So I know that I mentioned to you before we hopped on that I was listening to your recording with Isaac, and I feel like one of the things that he mentioned was reticence to charge a lot of money because we believe that with a, a high rate comes a lot more over delivering.
Hmm.
And so there's that conditional piece there. And then there's probably something about earning money being hard there too.
Right.
And hard doesn't always feel good. Hard
Right.
often doesn't feel good.
Yes. Yeah, it's I like I said, I love the topic. This is just one of those things. Like I said, health coaches eat this up because there's so many different reasons why we get sucked into it. I mean, I remember just talking to Isaac on the side. I think we may have brought it up in one of the episodes. Is really just like even if I charge a lot of money, I'm almost tied with the results of that particular person, and I feel guilty about it if this person doesn't do or achieve the results that they wanted. And I just have to disconnect myself from
Yeah.
outcomes because you know this and you're doing this mindset stuff. You're a master at it. You're helping all these people get on the right path. You know, if they follow what you say and they do what they have to do, they're going to get results. That's just the way it is. That's the expertise that you provide and we provide for our clients. And it's we don't know what the hell they're doing the other 24 hours in a day. They, like they could be like degenerate gamblers, right? Like we, like how are we gonna know? We're giving them the blueprint to be successful, but we don't know what the heck's going on. So it's like I had to separate myself from their outcomes as well. There's just so many layers to it.
Yeah. What I hear you saying is like that's that urge that we have as humans who like to help to take responsibility for other people's stuff. I've been down there. I've been like, I need to create this change. But the other side of that is there's a level of disempowerment that comes when we take responsibility for somebody else's things.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, there's a power in, I guess, thinking about what we do that's within our sphere of control.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been
Mm-hmm.
guilty of trying to overextend lots of times.
Yeah, yeah, no, and it's you only get better at it if you recognize it and put yourself in there, practice it out. So it definitely is a big deal. So I can't believe how fast this conversation has gone. I mean, we're always almost into the 45-minute range, and I know that I have a couple of questions left, but what I really wanted to do is kind of just get into like some first steps you think that a person should take, knowing that they do have an issue around money and they know that they're not in a space that they're completely happy with. What would be like the first step or two that you would recommend them doing in order to unpack some of this stuff?
Oh, that's so interesting because I have had an answer that I jumped to straight away, but recently I've been I feel called to reconnect with why you're doing it. And so maybe that's where you start. You start by exploring why are you looking into your relationship with money? What does it matter? And I feel like that's where, too, getting curious about that comes into play. When I was teaching, we did this process, and I believe it was stolen from the corporate manufacturing world, but we'd ask five whys, and it's not necessarily five whys, but it can be five whys, it can be more. So maybe you're thinking about exploring your relationship with money because you're like, my income isn't where I want it to be. So why does it matter that your income isn't where you want it to be? Well, I need money to pay for stuff. So why is income, and like just starting to explore that
Mm-hmm.
and connecting with what is your intention for working on your relationship with money. Maybe you envisage a way that you can feel more joyful when generating money.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think once you kind of lean into that, perhaps the next thing that I would do is just brain dump, pour onto the page or pour into a voice note Like, what are all the things? What are all the stories that I carry? Um, and you're probably not going to get every single story that is in your subconscious, but you're going to get a good starting point. And you're going to probably see some connections between the stories that you hold and the phrases that you carry.
No, I think those are two excellent examples. I remember doing that why exercise as well, and I think it's very helpful for a lot of different things in your life. And money, I can definitely see its benefit there as well. And of course, if that although those two steps don't necessarily work, we can always seek expertise from someone like yourself. So I want to give you an opportunity now to kind of share how we can get in touch with you and your social media handles, your website. So if anybody doesn't want to do this on their own, which can be definitely difficult, they have someone like you to walk them through it. So can you provide us with, like I said, your social media handles, your website, and whatever way that you feel most comfortable getting in touch with the audience?
Yeah, I am terrible at social media. Terrible.
Join the club.
And I am just leaning into the idea that this is not how I like to connect. I love calls. I don't love emails, but I love that emails lead to calls. So yeah, contact me through my website. The website is thefee.ca. And I'm a firm believer that you should start exploring on your own. But I was listening to another podcast recently and they were talking about therapy and they were like, you can't tickle yourself. And I feel like that's the way it is with some of the stuff. You
That's a
can't
good one.
see you can't see your own stuff all the time. It's
Mm-mm.
a lot easier to see other people's stuff than it is to see your stuff. And so maybe like when you're dipping your toe in the water, maybe it's unpacking this stuff with friends that are also on the journey.
Mhm.
But yeah, also, I love this stuff.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
let's have conversations about your dreams and let's have conversations about what beliefs we can give some love and compassion to so that you can live a little bit more fully.
Mhm. Amen. So just to echo your point, sometimes, we're definitely better coaches than players. We can't sometimes see what we're up to, and it's really something that's important for someone on the outside to kind of give us some of that guidance. So thank you for sharing how we could get in touch with you, and thank you for breaking down some of the issues that we have with this money situation. And I know that the audience that definitely got a lot of value out of this podcast. So I want to thank you for that.
Thank you for having me.
Oh,
I'm
my
grateful for your
pleasure.
time.
My pleasure. So have a great rest of the day.
Yeah, thanks. You too.
Hope you enjoyed listening to today's episode of the Health Coach Academy podcast. If you did, jump over to iTunes and leave a rating and or review. It goes a long way in helping get this message out to our fellow health coaches and people in our industry. Also, if you can, jump over to my website, omarcumberbatch.com, where I give out a lot of freebies, including my 5-day sugar challenge for people who are having issues with sugar. And also for health coaches, I have the book, Hidden. It's the 6 not so obvious ways to get your clients unstuck. Have a great day.